Hello, good morning everyone. And in the previous class, in the Python session videos, in previous class I have discussed the exception handling in Python. So exception is handling in two ways. First one is exception handling, next one is the assertion. So here exception means it is an event which occurs during the execution of a program that interrupts the normal flow of the program instruction. In general, when a Python script encounters a situation that it can't cope with, that means it can't go through the entire program and stops in the middle, so it raises an exception. So an exception is a Python object that represents an error. So when the Python script raises an exception, it must either handle the exception immediately, otherwise it terminates and quits the program. So we have the different ways to handle an exception. So we defined the try block. That means we can take a try block in order to handle exception. After that, include the except statement followed by a block of code which handles the program as elegant as possible. So consider the syntax of the try block and except as blocks. So here try block, you do your operations here, and except statement, when if there is an exception, then execute this block. Except exception 2, that means if there is another error, then you execute this block, otherwise as the remaining code in written in the program. So important points to remember is the a single try statement can have multiple except statements. This is useful when the try block contains the statements that may throw different types of exceptions. You can also provide generic except clause which handle any exception. That means we have to write the reason for that, why the error had occurred, why the program raises an error. We have to raise the exception clause in every program, and after the except clause you can include the else clause block. The code in the else block executes if the code in the try block doesn't raise an exception. So if there is no error in the try block, that means statements mentioned under the try block are executed successfully, there is no error, then the compile execute the program successfully. If not, then it goes for the, if raises any exception, then the cursor goes to the exception block and execute the statement mentioned under the exception block, and then remaining code will be remaining code and will be compiled successfully. Here I have taken a small program on this try block and except block. Here try block I have written two statements on the try block. First one is I have opened a file, that is the file name is a test file, and next one is that is open in a writing mode, and next writing some name, that is this is my test file for execution handling, for exception handling. So I have written this statement to the file text file in the writing mode, and then it has written except IO error. That means input output error. Suppose I am inputting something I am writing something to a already written file. I am writing some type of text to a file. That's why suppose if it tries an input output error, so I accept those statement will be written under the accept input output error. If not, if there is no error raised by the try block, then the remaining statement written content in the file successfully, and then simply close the file, close the opened file, and then the compile executes the code and produce the result as follows. And consider the another example. Here also I have taken a try block and written two statement. I have opened a file test file in the read mode. Here in the previous example I have open the test file in the read write mode. Here read mode, that is only reading purpose. Here in the previous example I have opened a test file for the writing mode, and then writing some statement output screen. If this try block raises an error, then cursor goes to the input output error block, then it executes the return print statement under the input output error, else the cursor return to the else statement, and execute the statement written under the else statement. As soon as compile the program, it produces the following result as without changing anything. And next we have the different exception with exception clause. So in order to handle these exceptions, we have to return some exception clause. That means except clause with no exceptions, the reason why the exception has arisen while executing the program. So this is the way, this is the syntax of try block. Here the operations are here. If it raises in try block, if it raises an error, it goes to the exception block, and execute the statement written under there. After executing the statements under the exception block, then it goes to the else statement. If there is an any statements, then execute there. So we have taken an example. Here you can accept the multiple number of return. You can write the multiple number of exceptions under the accept block, and then you can write the number of else statements after the exceptions, and try finally clause. So we can use a finally block with a try block. The finally block is a place, the final block is a place to put any code that must execute whether the try block raised an exception or not. So if we often use the finally block in order to execute the must and should statement, which are going to execute the must. So those statements are put under the finally block. Here I have taken a try block and written some statements. Then cursor goes to the final block, written the must and should statements to be executed. And then here I have taken a try block and finally blocks, written some statements under them. I have opened a file in the writing mode, and then written some statement onto the output screen, and then written a finally block that it has some error, that means it handles some errors, and then simply close the file. And next I have taken another try block. Here two try blocks are there, one inner try blocks, one try block and another try block. Here I have written a text file, open a text file in writing mode, then writing some statement on the output screen, then finally print a statement onto the output screen. Next one is the close the program. So input output address. So while opening a file in reading mode, if there is an area any error going to raise, then cursor goes to the exception error block and returns print the on the execute the statement written under there. And argument of an expression, that an exception can have the argument which is a value that gives additional information about the problem. So why the exception has occurred? So according to the argument, by using the argument definition, we can guess the, and we can know the actual problem of the exception. So here the syntax for this is that try block, we can write some statement, except is keyword, and next use it to some write the some statement where the exception going to occur. Next exception type as an argument. So if the write the code handle a single exception, you can have a variable follow the name of the exception. So here I have taken some example. Here is the method to declare a function. Here my function name is temp converter, which has some argument as variable, and try block. Here I have taken try block, written int of value is, suppose if except keyword, except by using except keyword, I have if any error occurred, so value error in the value error method any occurred as argument, value error as argument, then printing the some statement, and then printing the temporary convert method onto the output screen. So it produces the following result. And next one is the raising an exception. So we can raise exceptions in several ways by using the raise statement. So syntax for the raise is the exception, and it has arguments on how to you trace back those exceptions in the occurred in the program. So here the simple example to understand the raise the exception program. So definition is the keyword, function name, and it has some arguments, and level 1, if the level 1 less than 1, it raises an error, and it has some statements and return the level value. Why? Because this function is some, it returns, this function returns some value. And next one is the, in order to catch an exception, an except clause must refer to the statement thrown either as a class object or a simple string. So here I have taken a try block and written some statement, and except exceptions as the, that means those statements which are going to raise exception. So I have written the except block here, and then write some else block and written some lines of code. So this following example illustrates the use of raising an exception. So why we raise exception means, here is the program definition, a keyword and function name, and it has some arguments, and if the level 1, if the level less than 1, that means if the level less than 1, it raise an exception level and return level. Then I have to write a try block, and it the function name minus value, then print the levels except if there is any error, goes to the accept block and execute the statement written under the accept block. And next I have the some another is the user defined exception. So in the predefined exceptions, we can use the programmer or the coder has the way to write the he has the right to write the some user defined exception. Python allows us to create your own exception by deriving clauses from the standard built-in exception. So here is an example related to the runtime error. Here I have taken an example. Class network error is my class name and it has some argument runtime error. Definition: init is a method. It has two arguments, parameters self and argument. So self dot arg is equal to arg. See once again, take another example. Try block here, rise network error, and next one is the accept network error comma e. That means here if raises any exception in the network error method, so the cursor goes to this block and executes the statement print e dot arguments. That means I have to print some statements written and passed as an argument. So this is something about the exception handling in the Python. There are different ways of one exception handling. Exception is an error which cause interruption to the program execution, and next one is the exceptions, and next one is the different types of concepts under the exception handling in Python. So please try to understand the concept and go to my channel and like my videos, Jairam Infotech. Subscribe my channel and like my videos, and if you have any doubts, please if you have any doubts or suggestions you have to give, please comment below so that I can clarify your doubts and react to your comments. And thank you one and all. Have a nice day.